psychiatrist was just like, you have to cold turkey all of your meds. So this was when I was 21, and it was a week before I was moving out of state to go to grad school. So it was absolutely terrifying that like the medications I had been on for 9 years, I was just going to stop suddenly.
Wow, yeah, that's a lot of life transition all at once.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Hey guys, welcome back to the podcast. You just heard a clip from my friend Jayden. That is today's conversation. This is episode 184. Thank you guys so much for being here, for being a part of the Louder Now podcast. I really enjoy the talks I have with people, and I hope you enjoy the rest of this conversation today with Jayden.
I'm just curious when people like have a diagnosis and then take meds for a while and then like find their way off of the meds. Not that that has to be people's stories, or find a way to like maybe take as little as possible. It's more just a curiosity because sometimes I think about what life would be like
Yeah.
without medicine. But I do think there's a for it though too. So yeah, what's kind of some of your stories? Like you said, you had a misdiagnosis, and then
Yeah. So when I was 12, just right after I hit puberty, I got diagnosed with bipolar
okay,
and then put on mood stabilizers and shortly after antipsychotics, which, there's it's not great for the developing brain, but um essentially kind of the result of that was that I just got numbed out and I didn't really feel most of my feelings until they will all like boil over, and then I would just explode with rage. And I stayed on those medications for 9 years. Towards the end of that, during all of that, I also was taking an anxiety med as needed. For like, I was a music major, and so I would get so anxious before I ever needed to play the piano that my hands would start sweating and shaking, which is it's not great for playing the piano. Um,
right,
so
right,
I would take the meds before, and then eventually my anxiety overall got worse, and I started taking meds every day. And when I started taking the anxiety medication every day, I ended up gaining 70 pounds in 6 months. And at this time, I was training pretty hard in dance. I was dancing 15 to 20 hours a week, and I had a personal trainer and was monitoring what I was eating. And I was like, this actually doesn't make any sense that I'm gaining so much weight right now.
right.
And at the end ended up being pre-diabetic, which diabetes runs in my family, so I wanted to take that very seriously. And my psychiatrist was just like, you have to cold turkey all of your meds. So this was when I was 21, and it was a week before I was moving out of state to go to grad school. So it was absolutely terrifying that like the medications I had been on for 9 years, I was just going to stop suddenly.
Wow, yeah, that's a lot of life transition all at once.
Yeah.
Hmm. Yeah, wow, 70 pounds. I mean, that, yeah, weight gain is a side effect of a lot of stuff. I think people are all pretty aware of that, but that's a lot. Okay, interesting. All right. So grad school that was the tipping point of like, hey, I need to, or no, what was that like then getting off of cold turkey? Yeah.
Yeah, it was pretty intense because I had never experienced my full range of emotions before. And so now I am in a new state where I don't really understand the culture of this state. I didn't really fit in. I'm adjusting to grad school. Um, I don't have any friends, like just none of the supports. And I'm feeling my full range of emotions.
Right.
And I have no skills to manage any of it. So it was very overwhelming. I essentially became a stoner because it was the only thing that could help me manage. But luckily, my graduate program was a master's of social work. I was training to become a therapist.
Okay.
And so as I was experiencing all of these symptoms, I was also learning about it from a theoretical standpoint. And so I was able to start to learn different ways of thinking and start to learn different coping skills. Um, so luckily I didn't go completely off the deep end, but it was that first year was pretty rough.
Hmm. Yeah, I think that my curiosity is in like what you just said, like the full range of emotions. I think we can see that as well. That seems normal, although careful with the word normal sometimes, right? Like, that's I think people are afraid of that. Like feeling everything.
Hmm.
Well, can be terrifying, but like I think that's where you also experience like good feelings too, right? Like joy and love with other people, but like it feels like the meds takes away from that kind of I don't know what the right word is, fullness or.
I just moved a bit closer to the router.
Oh, okay. All right, cool. I think we're good. Still says it's recording, so we should be fine. So yeah, I was just saying that what you just kind of repeating what you said, like yeah, experiencing the full range of emotions and how that seems to be I was using the word normal, which maybe sometimes maybe we don't know what normal is, right? Like that's who's defining normal. That's like a cultural there's a lot of things behind that, but but it seems healthy to like know what you're feeling and you know so yeah, it's just interesting. I
Yeah.
guess I'm not saying that like get off your meds today so you can start feeling everything.
Oh, no, no, no. Do it
Right,
with a plan because I can
right.
tell you, like, um, just suddenly coming off my meds was absolutely no plan, was absolutely terrifying. Like, it was not like, and I was fortunate to be, again, in school learning about what was happening to me. But
Okay.
if I was not just living life without a therapist or without access to resources, like, I feel like I could have easily ended up severely ill, possibly in the hospital.
Right. So you never, yeah, exactly. And just to clarify with people, like my story is like I did get off my meds 2011, 12, and then um I didn't do it with the doctor and I should have, and I really learned the hard way and had like a horrible suicidal episode and then almost died from overdosing. And so I definitely know not to just do it on my own. That's not what and we're suggesting at all. But it's just more of a like, um, yeah. So where are you at with it now? Because you're saying it helps you. You also got a misdiagnosis too, right? And that kind of makes
Yeah.
it confusing. So,
Yeah, yeah. And so I think, in that time off meds, I really learned how to build a better relationship with my feelings. So, like, as a teenager, even when I felt really happy, I was always afraid, like, is this mania? Like, I just truly I didn't know what it felt like
mm,
to be genuinely happy and not have it pathologized, right? Let alone, like, a
mm,
lot of us have poor relationships with sadness or anxiety. But yeah, got to be good friends with all those feelings. But it
yeah,
turns out I actually have ADHD.
okay,
And yeah, I am now medicated for ADHD, but for a very long time, I wasn't. I think in grad school, I realized, oh, this is not bipolar, this is ADHD. Honestly, I was a very textbook case ADHD. I was like, how did we miss this?
right,
Um, and I've been a very active person.
okay,
So I started, I started playing roller derby. And then I moved to a different state after I graduated. I moved out
Okay.
here to Seattle and I started dancing again. And so movement really helped me manage my ADHD. And then I just started learning a whole bunch about holistic methods with like food and different breathing techniques and enzymes and vitamins and all of that kind of stuff. And that
Hmm.
became a specialty in my therapeutic practice as well. Um, and then I stopped working at a crisis center with really vulnerable populations, which produces a lot of adrenaline, which can be very stabilizing for someone with ADHD. And I went from that environment to private practice where I was just sitting down
Okay.
8 to 10 hours a day talking to someone. And I was like, I can't do that. I literally cannot sit still. Like I am focusing so hard on trying to keep my body still
Right.
that I can't hear what my clients are telling me. And at that point, that's when I decided to actually go on medication for my ADHD. And that's been very stabilizing for me. It feels really good. I still try to medicate as little as possible and I'll use like movement and other modalities to manage. But I still haven't gone back on any other like mood or anxiety drugs because I'm still a little scared of them.
Yeah, interesting. Yeah, I mean, so when you say that you take it as little as possible, do you mean you don't take it every day, like it's like as needed, or you just mean you try to have like the lowest dose that
I try
they
to have
gave, or yeah.
I try to have a lower dose, and I take I'm supposed to take it twice a day, and so a lot of times, if like especially on the weekends, I might only take it once a day. Um, or I think in the summertime, I generally have a lot more energy, and focus and excitement, and so sometimes I definitely need to take it twice a day, and other times I'm like, oh, I'm not feeling I need it as much, and it's
Okay.
really just listening to my body.
Hmm. Yeah, well, I thank you for sharing all of that. I mean, I think that I'm ADHD too, but I mean, I take one thing for that, but then I'm still taking like, bipolar meds too. So, do you see that that's like a common thing with people you work with, that ADHD looks like bipolar? Because I feel like the ADD and ADHD are feel like they're very common, especially, or I don't know, or is it complicated with like technology, right? Like we can't, like, we're looking at our phones every 5 minutes and then that looks like we're ADD. I don't, is that, yeah.
Okay, so I have lots of thoughts on this. I think if you're a trained professional, ADHD and bipolar look absolutely nothing alike.
Oh, okay.
Um,
Okay.
I guess if we're talking about bipolar 2, maybe, but
Yeah.
I really like a manic episode that like it looks like its own complete thing, and I really am I don't understand how for decades like providers are just misdiagnosed. I do understand there's a lot of just systemic oppression issues going on there,
Right.
but a manic episode is a very obvious, clear thing.
That's true. Yeah, that's true. Yeah.
As for like the how much ADHD there is, um, and like how much I see it, I think it's really important to know that trauma affects your brains in a similar way as ADHD.
Hmm.
And so actually, if someone has developmental trauma, which means trauma from under the age of 12, it's very, very, very difficult to distinguish if it's ADHD or trauma. Right. And they're going to probably to respond similarly to those medications because what's happening neurologically is very similar. And this is also why you saw an increase in people seeking ADHD diagnoses during the pandemic, because that was a global trauma. And so they started having trauma symptoms that mimic ADHD, or if they had already had ADHD, but it was at a mild enough severity that they didn't need to seek treatment, the trauma of the pandemic made those increased the severity of the symptoms and made it more obvious. Um, so ADHD, a lot of times people think it's, um, oh, I just can't focus on this thing, right? It's actually there are a lot of different things, right? Inattention is one aspect of ADHD, but there's all of these other different things that we're looking at about, you know, um, how is your brain processing information, and executive functioning skills, um, just like starting to see like how the body thrives and like what types of environment the body is thriving. Trying not to get like super clinical here, but
Right.
I do hear it a lot. It's like, oh, everyone's on their smartphone, so we're all going to get ADHD. Well, no, everyone's on their smartphone, so their attention span might go down, but there's a whole bunch of other, symptoms that would you would have to also have to get ADHD diagnoses.
Okay. Yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, yeah, I think it's like before we had phones. I mean, I'm 38, so I was like in high school before I had, I was super distracted with whatever it was in front of me without the phone, like in a very general sense, right? So it just seems that the phone thing is, or our videos or the TikToks and the Instagram, everything's getting shorter and smaller and shorter and smaller. It doesn't mean you can't, listen to Joe Rogan for 3 hours and forget everything or something, because I think you can, you know. But yeah, no, that's interesting. And yeah, and so a lot of your so what made you want to get into this work, like the social work, and then I know you kind of specialize. Do you specialize in trauma or just kind of everything, or yeah, how did that happen?
Yeah, yeah. Well, I feel like every therapist has an origin story.
Yeah.
So my origin story, was in eighth grade. Um, Someone who I was not like very close with. They looked sad at the after school table while we were eating our snacks, and I asked them what was up, and they're like, "I'm gonna go home and kill myself." And I was like,
Oh,
"Oh, okay. Well, maybe let's talk about that." And I had recently come out of a suicidal episode myself, and
okay.
so I was just able to kind of connect on a person to person level. And the next day, she came up to me and was like, "Hey, thank you for talking to me and saying hi to me yesterday because I don't know if I would be here if you didn't." And in that moment, I realized that all of the trauma that I was going through as a child didn't have to be for no reason, right? Like I could use my experiences to help people. I wasn't just suffering for nothing. So always wanted to be a therapist, had a quick stint of doing music therapy, and then decided to go back to pursuing regular talk therapy. I was actually originally very interested in borderline personality disorder, and that was my original specialty.
Okay.
But then learning more about that, I realized that personality disorders are just a presentation of complex trauma. And so then my specialty kind of expanded to complex trauma. But when you specialize in complex trauma, you are, of course, going to see a lot more neurodivergence because, again, of how the brains are similar. You'll see a lot of similar symptoms, and a lot of complex medical issues because ongoing trauma really affects the body on a physical way, and so people have a lot of physical health issues. And I want to kind of be mindful, and already like, how can I be holistic in treating ADHD for myself? So I was learning a lot more about physical health, and so now my main specialties I would say are like a holistic healthcare of complex trauma, and a lot of integrative health techniques.
Okay.
But I love a good personality disorder. That's really my favorite.
Nice. Yeah, I don't know a whole lot about borderline. I mean, I think I know a little bit that is it the idea is like you don't really take medication for that. It's more of like some is that like a myth? Like there's not, how like bipolar and depression, you can take medication kind of help
Mhm.
stable out, but borderline, it's like more complicated than that.
Mm, medications don't treat disorders. Medications treat symptoms.
Right.
Right? So even
Sure.
if you have depression, you can take medication and you still want to learn skills of how to change your thought patterns and how do you motivate yourself to get out of bed, right? Like the medication doesn't do everything.
Yeah, that's true.
Um, and that's going to be the same thing with, personality disorders. Medications will treat some of the symptoms, hopefully to the point where they are able to do more of the therapeutic, like, changing your skills and your mindset and all of that kind of stuff. But a lot of the focus with BPD is skills training. How do you emotionally regulate? How do you have distress tolerance? So essentially, if you're angry, how can you punch a pillow and not a person, right? Or how can
Yeah.
you go
Good
like
idea. Good idea, guys. Good
yeah,
idea.
exactly. You're going to experience the anger. That's fine. But
Yeah.
what are you doing with it? And then how do you communicate effectively? And then underlying a lot of BPD specifically is instability in relationships. So that's usually tied to not having a deep sense of self. You don't really know who you are. And so you change your identity based on the people around you, or really get overly attached to other people's perceptions of you because your perception of yourself is not very solid.
Got you. Okay, interesting. So what, I'm sure you've been asked this many times. What is the difference between trauma and then um, complex trauma? And I think you get asked that on another podcast, but I don't really know if I understand the difference besides having the book Body Keeps the Score and not reading it. So everybody quotes that book. You're like, I got it on Audible and I have it now, but I've only listened to a little. I'm sure you know that book and
Yeah.
many other books, but yeah, like what? Because I think like you're saying that, or the assumption I've had for many years is like, is my bipolar a result of stuff I went through as a kid? I had kind of a pretty rough relationship with my dad. He was like verbally abusive, but not physically abusive. So I don't, is that trauma or well, because he was like that my whole like the whole time I was home. He never like snapped out of it and got better. And I think he was bipolar and never dealt with his stuff, but never got any medication. So is that complex trauma or some level of trauma? I'm using you to
Hmm.
do therapy with me.
Yeah.
I should tell you.
Well,
So
I want to say that there are different theories about, like, is bipolar, a presentation of trauma. Some people
right.
believe that everything is a presentation of trauma versus kind of like the past few decades, it's really been this more medical, biological based model.
Okay.
Um, I'm more in the former camp of, like, I think that the body does everything for a reason, right? And even when it seems very extreme to us, our society is very extreme. And so a lot of us are not doing well because our society is not doing well. Like, it's not, to be well adjusted in a sick society is not saying much. So I'm not saying that nothing is biologically based. People cannot be born with a bipolar. I just think on that spectrum, I'm closer to experiences do have a pretty big impact, and the body's trying
Right.
to help you survive.
Okay.
But answer the, like, complex trauma question.
Yeah.
Um, Trauma, uh, there's like a trauma, right? Something that happens to your body, right? If I poke my arm, like, that's a tiny little trauma to my arm, but that's not going to really, there's not that many effects of that. Like, my body can absorb that, right? But if it got punched, it might bruise, right? Or if it got hit with a hammer, my bone might actually break,
Right.
right? These are all like these types of, like, getting hit, which could be the trauma. But really, when we're talking about trauma, it's more about the effect of what just happened. It's not the event itself, it's the effect. And so a lot of people are like, oh, I didn't go through something quote unquote traumatic enough to have trauma. Well, if your body is responding in a way, in a certain way, then like, yes, you did, because it's not about the event, it's about how your body is responding. So trauma happens when there has been some sort of invalidation, a safety concern, um, or a lack of control that caused your nervous system to get activated, but not complete its cycle, right? So, an example of this is you're sitting in school and someone starts teasing you, making fun of you for whatever reason as a child. And your body, which is evolved still for the hunter-gatherer phase, is saying, oh no, I'm not socially fitting in. I might get kicked out of my tribe, and then I will be in isolation and will die because the body always thinks it's going to die. Um, no,
It's
I
true.
mean,
Yeah. It's funny, but it's true. Like,
yeah.
yeah, not that funny if you're struggling. Sorry. Yeah. Okay.
But I mean, like, if you're like, why
Yeah.
do I feel like I'm going to die? Because your body actually does think it's going to die, and you have to tell it that it's not, like very actively.
Right.
So, okay, your body thinks it's going to die because you're being teased. Um, but you're sitting in school, so you can't really move your body. You can't do anything. But your fight or flight system just got activated. It sensed
Right.
danger. Whenever it senses danger, it starts producing energy. What it would like to do with that energy is fight or flee, right? That's the
Right.
fight or flight system,
Right.
which is expending that energy. But if you're sitting at school, you likely can't just run out of the classroom, right? You're going to get in trouble. So you just have to sit, and that energy has nowhere to go. So then your nervous system doesn't complete the cycle, and that energy gets stuck in your body. That traumatic energy that gets stuck in your body, that is what causes trauma symptoms. And the more of that you have, then the more intense your symptoms are, right? And that is what starts to, uh, that is really what complex trauma is all about, is like looking at how all of these experiences over time start to create narratives, but because there's all this trapped energy in the body, and you have to work to undo the narratives. Now, this is slightly different than like a single event trauma, where that is so essentially what I just described is like someone just pokes you a whole bunch of times and it's so sore that eventually like you get like a little callus there, right? A
Right.
single event trauma is more like you just got hit with a hammer and so much just happened to your body so quickly that the nervous system couldn't respond, like it couldn't manage the amount that it just received. It's like, whoa, this is way too much danger, way too much intensity. I cannot actually process that. And so that does actually produce a slightly different biological response. So if you have PTSD, like the classic, understanding of PTSD, that's usually more based off of single event trauma. And then complex trauma is kind of what I described earlier. And then, of course, people can have both.
Right. Interesting. Yeah, that's a really good way to describe it. Because yeah. So I'm guessing in your work, part of what you do is like, I'm guessing in identify like the person being able to identify the like I think the question is more like, well, how do you heal from the trauma? Is that what where you're saying if it's in your body, then now you have to like kind of use your body to
Yes.
like breath work, or is that what you help people do? Like, or is that what you've had to do yourself too? Like, oh, this is in my body now. I need to, because that's like the $1 million question is like, how do you heal from the trauma? And maybe people don't want to heal. That could be part of the challenge. Or they don't know. They know they're like, oh, my parents messed me up, but I don't know what to do, or whatever.
Yeah. Well, healing is scary, and if you've been outside of your body and just living in your brain, right, but
Right.
not really connected to your body, that first time you really touch in is scary. And I think like for us, like we kind of have that experience of coming off meds and then being like, "Ooh, wow, we're dropped back in our body and this is really intense,
Hmm.
right? Um, so that is happening to people who have been really dissociated, right? Meds help with the dissociation, but you can also just straight up dissociate on your own sometimes. And
Yeah,
so
that's true. Yeah.
if you've been really dissociated, not connected with your body, and you just drop in, that's really overwhelming. And so sometimes for people like mindfulness, like makes me really agitated or like, triggered or whatever, breathing makes me feel worse. Yeah, because you're dropping too quickly into your body. Um,
Hmm.
with any relationship, I talk a lot about relationships, like in building a relationship with your body, you want to do a nice slow burn, right? You don't
Hmm.
want to just trauma dump with your body, right?
Right.
It's not like an immediate, like we're besties now. Like, no, that's usually not super healthy. Take it slow. Take your body on some dates. Get to know it, right? Give it feedback of, hey, I noticed you're experiencing this thing.
Right.
You think that like because that person looked at me a certain way that I'm in danger. Appreciate that info, but let me tell you why I'm not. Because I'm a whole adult that can get myself to safety, and that's just a barista that I never have to see again, right? Like, so it's actually fine.
Yeah, yeah.
And like let's actually do some soothing. Um, but yeah, so it's actually a lot of like conversing with your body. Like a very simple technique is put your hand on whatever part of your body is talking to you. If is experiencing anxiety, you might feel that in your chest or in your stomach or your arms start shaking, right? Like literally your body is talking to you. And by putting a hand on your body, you can talk back, right? That's a very basic way to get started. But,
Yeah.
long term, really looking at movement, um, food, music, all of these other things that interact with your body a bit more can help you build a more positive relationship over time.
Yeah. Wow. Well, I feel like I'm getting some free therapy with this podcast. That's actually the reason why I asked you to be on. I have a lot of problems. No, I'm kidding. Well, yeah, I do, but no, I'm kidding. But yeah, no, that's very helpful. I mean, and I think I heard you say on another one of your podcasts you were on, like anything that doesn't make you feel safe is kind of like that's the and then you were saying how it's not really about good or bad things that we do. It's like whatever's helpful or not helpful.
Yes.
And I think that that's the good versus bad duality that we have in our lives and our culture is maybe that's like a hindering to like the healing is like, oh, I only want to so yeah, I mean the body is important for sure. I get what you mean. It's like a lot of jobs and things we do. I mean, even your job, you're sitting down and a lot of things are like sitting. I'm working on the podcast. I'm sitting. I'm
Yep.
not, you can't really do it while you're running, you know. So yeah, that's cool. And then, so how long have you now been doing this, your own practice?
Let's see. I started in 2022. So coming up on 2 years now of my own practice, and then I was in a group practice before then. Um, but yeah, it's been really great. And kind of even what you're saying of like therapy has to be sitting down. No, it doesn't.
Yeah, yeah.
I
Oh,
get
okay.
my
Well,
clients to move so much during therapy. I'm like, we just gonna wiggle. I'm like, what are you feeling in your body? And they're like, my shoulders
yeah.
are tensing. And I'm like, let's wiggle it out. Let's get
Okay.
goofy.
Yeah,
I
that's good.
love to prescribe therapeutic twerking. A lot of trauma lives in your hips, so shake them.
Really?
Hmm.
I did not know that, and I do not know if I know how to twerk, but maybe I'll do it after this when we're done.
You You know what? Even if it's poor twerking, if you're shaking your hips, you like good things happen, right? And we know like in yoga, when you do hip openers, it's like people know like you can start crying and have these big releases. So maybe you don't want to go that deep. Maybe you just want to have fun, right? Like healing doesn't also always have to be like so intense. Go to the
Right.
club and can we cuss here?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Okay, throw some ass. Go to the club, throw some ass. The music is like music does amazing things for the brain. That's a whole different, thing. And then you're loosening up all the stuck energy in your hips and you're with people in a safe environment.
Yeah,
Oh
yeah.
my gosh.
Go with your friends. Yeah, I can think of a club right now. It's right next to my church, so it might be controversial to go, but I think I should go. So, but at Club 340 downtown Pomona, everybody. What's up?
Hey.
Yeah, I know. I was doing my Lyft job, or a few months ago or whatever, and I took someone to this club, and they're like, "Do you want to come and hang out with us?" And I was like, "Oh, I'm wearing sweatpants. No thanks." I should have said yes. But yeah, no, I got what you mean. You're like you're saying, it doesn't have to be. And so so as a therapist though, do you do therapy, or are you just like, do you do therapy yourself, or what helps you
Oh,
decompress from the job? Because I've been working with foster kids for the last few months, and I'm like, I need to decompress. I need to learn how to wind down. It's really hard. I don't know what to do, besides just watching movies.
yeah. Yeah. Yes, therapy is a draining job. I'm not gonna lie. But I do have my own therapist.
Okay.
Um, I move my body regularly. So for me, like, you know, uh, to be a therapist, I'm having to hold a lot of emotional space for people, and so getting out of my head and into my body is really helpful. I do a lot of weightlifting, yoga, and then obviously dance. And then I also can use that like dance. I use dance to express
Okay.
what I'm feeling a lot too, especially if I'm not feeling like I can find the words. I can just like move my body and my body will say what I needed to say. And then I have a whole bunch of other practices, like, like I like to journal. I believe in like, really getting a good amount of sleep and trying to, eat well. And by that, I don't mean any diet bullshit, but like I listen to my body and I'm like, what does it need? Like what would make it feel like what does my body need right now? And like very
Right.
intuitive eating. And I have really good social supports. I have an amazing community. And so like it's not just me trying to heal from a stressful job on my own. Like I have a whole community that supports me in that.
Yeah, that's really big. Yeah, yeah. Well, yeah, community is big, especially with the stigma behind talking about anything like depression or anxiety or feeling sad. Like I think we feel like we need to always show up like happy, when you're with your friends, like only talk about good stuff, and it's like you can do that, but if something's really on your mind, but that's really awesome. Yeah. And so what do you like to do for fun? So besides the dance and are you like a movie person? Are you a book person? I want to ask you what you've read about trauma too. But you already know.
Oh, yeah, I am a big book person. In my other room, you saw a bit of my library.
Yeah, yeah,
Um, and those are just the physical books because I also do a lot of audiobooks.
yeah. Me too.
Um, yeah, and podcast definitely am down to just like drink a beer and watch some Netflix or just like smoke a J and just like chill out. I mean, dancing is like a big part of my like what
Yeah,
makes
yeah.
me
Of course.
happy. Um, I'm also like I like to engage in other. I'm a big nerd. I love learning things. And so I actually really do enjoy like just learning about like physical and mental health, but sometimes I like to just learn about other stuff. So I read a lot about comparative religion and anthropology, and I'm learning both Spanish and Portuguese, and I'm weirdly into physics, and so I'll just like read books on physics. So just like finding other ways to engage my brain.
Okay, that's cool. Yeah. I physics. There's what's that book? Power and Force. Is that what it's called? I don't know. Some classic physics book. I've never read it, but my closest thing physics to me is like listening to like people on Joe Rogan who are like one guy was talking about UFOs and he's like a physicist and it was like a 4 hour episode. I was like, I have no idea what this guy is talking about, but this kind of is cool. I don't know if you believe in UFOs, but it could be out there. It could be.
I highly doubt we're the only intelligent species in this whole universe.
Yeah, yeah. So when you like, I'm guessing, so your trauma education was that mostly school, or is reading your body keeps the score a good place to start? Because everybody mentions that book, but you're a professional, so I'm sure there's other ones too.
Yeah, okay, so most people don't know this. We don't learn that much about this type of things in grad school, right?
Okay.
Grad school actually teaches us more of the skill set of being a therapist, how to like reflect, summarize, notice our nonverbals and be intentional, like with our body language, and then like the critical thinking that
Uh-huh.
is required to like how do you think like a therapist. The only modality we learned in therapy in like my 2-year program was cognitive behavioral therapy, right?
Right. Thoughts,
And then
feelings,
there's like anything
behaviors.
else, like you're just gonna have to do ongoing education. So it's been a lot of reading books. I've read The Body Keeps the Score. It's a fine place to start. I think that there are a lot of um better books. Well, better. I don't need to compare, but I think that there's some easier books,
Right.
maybe. I really like My Grandmother's Hands.
Uh-huh.
Uh, that's probably one of my favorite books that I've read. And then there's a memoir that changed my life, and What My Bones Know.
I'm writing this down, guys. Here to learn what my bones know. Okay. Nice.
Yes. And then if you're interested, if you have like maybe some like a lot of physical health stuff too, especially like my chronic illness peeps out there, um, check out The Myth of Normal.
Oh, is
That's
that
another.
Gabor Mate?
Yeah. Hmm.
Yeah, I have it on Kindle because it was like $2 on Kindle. And then okay. Yeah, I like that guy. I've heard him on like Ritual. He's on a bunch of podcasts. Yeah, the Myth of Norm. That guy's dope.
Yeah, he's a big inspiration of mine.
Amazing. Well, you live in Seattle, so someday I will come and be close to maybe where you are because I will definitely go see my sister again. But so how do you like the rain and the clouds? Does that bother you, or are you just so used to it now? Or no?
Um,
Because I would struggle. And that's like I said, California spoils us with the sun. So
it's not great.
yeah,
It's
it's not
like you survive it. It's not that I ever enjoy it. The summers here are so lovely, that you just kind of forget that you hate being here for 6 months out the year. Um,
right.
but I also feel like I can't be the best like Seattle spokesperson right now because I'm actually moving to Spain later this year. So
Whoa. Is that public? Well, you're saying it on a podcast, so I guess. But
yeah,
people know that you're moving to Spain. It's not a surprise.
no, it's not. I've been giving
Oh,
people lots
cool.
of heads up. I
Yeah.
most of my work is virtual, so it's fine. My personal training clients, those are the only people that I won't be able to continue with. But
Wow. So that's I just had a friend who just went on vacation to where in Spain? Barcelona, or that's the capital or something? Or no?
Madrid is the capital, but I'll be moving to Valencia.
Wow. Okay, and what's prompting you to do that? Like just you've always wanted to do it and you're just
Yeah, it's been a lifelong goal. I want
okay.
to have children, and it's very expensive in Seattle, like insufferably so. And I want to be able to work a reasonable amount and still, have a decent quality of life. Also, just America is a bit on the struggle bus right now. And I think I kind of want to see how things play out from afar, to be honest.
Yeah, this is gonna be an interesting political year. Um, yeah, it feels like the world's ending, but I would say just kidding. I anyway, yeah. I would love to visit. That's amazing, though. I mean, yeah. I wonder what life would be like in another country. That's a whole nother podcast. But well, I appreciate your time and meeting you. I feel like we've just been having coffee with each other on a
Yeah.
podcast. Like we and I. Do you like coffee? Is Seattle known for coffee?
Oh gosh, yeah. And before I moved to Seattle, I was like, I am not going to become a like coffee snob. And like literally 3 months in, I was like,
Yeah, yeah.
are these not like dark roast? Is this a mild roast bean? What is this trash in my cup? And I was like, oh my gosh, who have I become? So yes, I have become a coffee snob. I drink lots of it.
What's the spot to go to? Because honestly, I've only been to well, I didn't even go into the original Starbucks. I was down there and I walked over to it and it was like
Hmm.
super crowded because I think it was like a Saturday or something. And I was like, oh, that's cool. That's Pike Place. Got it. But I never even actually went in. I
Yeah,
oyster soup or something or cool soup somewhere. But
only tourists go there. Like Seattleites do not drink Starbucks coffee at all. Like we're all over
probably
Starbucks.
okay.
There's so many local like shops, and it's like, support local. That are is like better than Starbucks,
Yeah, yeah,
honestly. Um, it is
right.
so when you're like, what's the best spot? It really just depends on the neighborhood. In my neighborhood, there's a place called The Station that is a community hub, is Black and Latino owned, and they just do a lot of like give back to the community. They sell
Okay,
art. It's a really cool place to chill.
nice. Well, okay, so my last question for you would be like what I've asked a lot of people on here, especially in the mental health space, like what advice do you give to someone who is kind of like the story you shared about the girl who was that you helped in school. Like what advice do you give to someone who's feeling struggling or hopeless or just could have a lot of trauma, I don't know where to start. Like what would you say to them?
Yeah, I would say start small,
Yeah,
right? Like I feel like people when they're struggling, they feel like they need to have big goals in life and things that inspire them and like this big purpose for living and it can be so existential and overwhelming. And you don't need all of that right away, right? I mean, long-term goals is great. But like if you're really struggling, what are the things that make it easier for you to get through that day? How can you get through that day? And then how can you do that thing again tomorrow? Because what is the point about worrying a year from now if you're not sure you're going to make it there? So start small. What were the little things that, like, is it really just treating yourself out to that fancy coffee? Can you really just give yourself a cookie? Like, do you want a sticker chart? You're not too old for a sticker chart. Do you want to give yourself a sticker every time you put the dishes up? Because give yourself a freaking sticker. There's nothing
yeah,
wrong with that.
totally.
Like,
Yeah.
if it brings you joy, just do it.
Yeah, that's really good. Yeah, baby steps, Bob, for real. What about Bob, right? Baby steps. Yeah, well, thank you so much for your time. And what's the best way for people to you have anything to advertise? Like you're on
Yeah.
Instagram, right? You have your own practice, so yeah.
Yeah. So my business is called Tice Consulting and Therapy. It stands
Okay.
for Trauma Informed Social Equity, so TISE. And so it's pretty consistent across, my website. It's ticeconsultingandtherapy.com, uh, at Tice Consulting and Therapy on Instagram and TikTok. And then my email is ticeconsultingandtherapy@gmail.com. And yeah, I do therapy for people in Washington State. I do consulting for other health professionals and businesses who want to be trauma informed or DEI focused. I do trauma informed personal training, and I also host lots of workshops. So this weekend, I'm doing BDSM for healing trauma in relationships. At the end of this month, I'm doing a CEU course on healing the trauma of systemic oppression. And in April, I'll be doing a series of movement for mental health where we're going through, different types of movement to help different mental health symptoms. So I'm always doing something new because I have ADHD and I'm excitable. So if you just sign up for my newsletter or follow me on Instagram, you can see all of the happenings.
Yeah. Wow, amazing. Thank you so much. This was really fun. I appreciate meeting you on Facebook, and which is a great place to meet people for podcasters, by the way, everyone. There's like
Yes.
thousands of people on these groups. So I appreciate you responding to my but all right, well,
Yeah.
I'll let
Thank
you
you for
go. Have
having
a
me.
great sorry, what'd you say?
I said thank you for having me.
Yeah, yeah, no, you're welcome. And I like your hair too. I didn't tell you that.
Thanks.
So, okay, well, I'm gonna let you go. We'll be in touch. And again, thank you for being on the podcast. And yeah, have a great, I guess, what is today? Friday weekend?
Yeah.
Yeah.
You too.
Okay. All right, we'll be in
Bye.
touch. Okay, bye.
See you.
All right, guys, episode 184. Thank you so much to my special guest today. Thank you guys for listening, for watching. You're looking at me right now during this episode, and you're also listening. Loudernownpodcast.com/episodes is where you can go to find all the episodes for the podcast. I'm currently taking a Instagram break and possibly will be maybe taking a Facebook break. I know that doesn't do well with the podcast when you say stuff like that, but I'm going to do some episodes where I talk about why I'm wanting to do that. But usually I put a link for my Instagram, and then I am on Facebook currently, Jared Deal. You can find me as my Louder Now podcast logo, and TikTok. Possibly I'll put some stuff up on there, but I'm kind of not really on that either. So YouTube, guys, that's it. YouTube and podcast apps. But thank you guys for listening. Thanks again to my special guest, louderNowPodcast.com/donate. If you'd like to make a donation to the podcast, whether it's a one-time thing or a monthly thing, I would really appreciate that. And most of all, I appreciate you being here listening. And if you guys have any questions or feedback about today's episode, trying to remember to look in the camera. Am I doing it right? Please let me know if I'm doing it wrong. I would like to know that. If I was sitting down talking to you and I didn't look you in the eye, you would probably say something. I bet you would. And if you didn't, then, well, you should say it the next time I see you. So, all right, guys. Well, thank you for being here, and we'll see you next time.